Imagine a restaurant that aligns with the way we wish we could eat every day. Our guest today made that a reality. With no prior restaurant experience, he launched a fast casual chain focused on health first practices. What's that mean? No seed oils, 100% grass fed meats, no plastic cutting boards, organic ingredients, and non toxic cleaning methods. The concept quickly caught fire and is now expanding across California with plans to grow nationwide. Today, he's sharing how this approach is reshaping the restaurant industry and hopefully the medicine industry as well. This is the story of Talo Organic with Graham Honig. Graham, so great to have you on.
Thanks for having me on. I'm excited.
You know, I was talking to you just before this and mentioning how difficult it is to break into the restaurant business, low margins, lots of competition. You had no prior experience. So what was your why to really jump into this and create a brand that had to go against conventional restaurant methods?
Yeah, I think the why was fairly simple, and there was the motivation of my wife and I hadn't been able to really eat out for a period of 4 to 5 years. We'd go to the occasional sushi restaurant maybe once every few months, and even that, is not safe. Their rice, they had different, rice bran oils and sugars to make it actually sticky for the sushi, and but so there was this kind of necessity aspect, and there was also this passion aspect of the last probably 7, 8 years is when I really, kind of turned my health around and started going down the rabbit hole of, this toxic cesspool we live in. And that kind of started with, I was really into regenerative farming. That was kind of my first soiree into this, which is kind of ironic. Before that, the standard American diet. I was, Chick-fil-A and In-N-Out 3 times a week, full bags of Chex Mix, soda. Oh my gosh. I honestly, looking back, like I was impressed I was as in good of health as I was. And, so when I started getting interested in regenerative farming, then there was this natural evolution of kind of questioning, okay, wait, if the standard farming is this bad, what's our food production system like? And then, there was a podcast here with Peter Attia, and then one with Rhonda Patrick. And, next thing you know, it's Paul Saladino on Joe Rogan. And you just start getting this whole picture painted of, wow, our food system is like literally poison. And so anyway, that was kind of the impetus. But I think it was a leg up for me, honestly, not having the restaurant experience. I think that's why, as you said, kind of previously before we started recording, was there's been a few restaurants who've tried to do similar things. And there's a few like restaurants out there that are no seed oils, but I think it's this holistic picture that everybody kind of gravitated toward, and why our social presence really caught. And it's the fact we don't just stop at like switching our frying oil, right? It's no plastic cutting boards. We use reverse osmosis water in our rice. We don't marinate in plastic. All of our meats are pasture raised and 100% grass fed. Down to the sanitizing solution we use in our sink. I did like a full month's research on it just to make sure, there's no toxic byproducts on the dishes, which we can get into that as well. But the restaurant industry it's a really toxic industry. And I'm still shocked at each thing I discover every day of like, wait, restaurants normally use this, like, whether it's a fiberglass based grill scrubber, and it just, the list goes on and on. And so, I think that was a big help for us, which was, I approached this not from a restaurant space, but rather from someone who, I would never think about using that in my home kitchen. Why, when I'm supposed to be the professional and someone's coming to pay me for a service, why would I give them worse than what I would just whip up at home?
Right. And it does make sense because I've always felt this about the medical industry. You need an outsider perspective to change things, right? The status quo of conventional medicine and kind of where it is requires an outsider thinking because everyone else is kind of programmed in to certain belief systems and the way things have been. But the way things have been, as we know in the food industry, has led us to be sicker and sicker. So you got to have that outsider. So I really respect that you didn't have any experience, but you did have the knowledge base to understand what it should look like, right? And so you applied that. Now, there must have been serious challenges. I mean, you spent a month probably just like you said, researching just like what isn't toxic for clean, what like in the grand scheme of things, what were some of the easier fixes and what were some of the really big challenges that you ran into? Because I'm just curious because you're again, holistically, there are so many things that need to be done to provide quality food that is non-toxic, that is organic. But tell me, what were some of the like challenges you came up against?
Yeah, I think, the no seed oils is not, it's not the hardest, especially because you can use avocado oil and things like that and be labeled as no seed oils. Now, we didn't do that. We use, 100% grass fed and pasture raised beef tallow for our sauteing oil and for deep frying. We use extra virgin olive oil in some of and it's organic, of course, in some of our dressings, and coconut oil in our rice. But, I think, marinades is a hard part because a lot of, to
Yeah.
keep that fat content, moisture, they usually, load it up with canola oil or sunflower
Mhm.
oil, and it keeps, the chicken or the steak super moist while it's marinating. I think that was a challenge. Honestly, I think a lot of it is just the accumulation of the small things. So it's like,
Yeah.
the fact that we don't use those plastic Cambros, right, to marinate our meats in. And so you've got to spend all this extra money on stainless steel pans and, the cleaning solutions. Like, a lot of people use this thing called boil out in the deep fryer, and it's made with just an alarming amount of concerning chemicals. And, we can't do that. We have to use a variety of, baking soda and vinegar and all this and just extra elbow grease scrubbing it out. And it's more labor hours. And
Yeah.
I just honestly, I think it's the accumulation of all of that. And then at the end of the day, still delivering. People eat with their eyes and their taste buds first, right? You know, I'd like to think people would still choose our food if it was, B rated in flavor just because it's so healthy. But, I'm also realized that's not how it works. Our food
Yeah.
has to be phenomenal. You have to enjoy eating it. And so I don't know if there's one thing I can point to specifically, but honestly, a lot of the challenges for me have just been understanding how to run and scale a restaurant operation. So I think that's where, most of the challenges come. A lot of the natural stuff, it's it's maybe not easy, but it, it comes naturally to me. It's what I'm passionate about. So those problems are easier for me to solve because I'm like, oh yeah, like this is what I hang my hat on. I'll find a cleaner method. I'll find a natural way to do X, Y, Z. I think it's all the natural that, what you cited before with the restaurant industry is, it's a different beast, and it's hard to run a successful one. And so I think it's just been, the basic restaurant challenges, if I'm being honest.
For sure. And then it's not just those challenges, you're reverse engineering things as well from where they are in the kind of conventional realm into what would be a healthier version. You got to kind of, trial and error, I'm sure was a big part of this and just doing tons of research into every little element of the process. But, you go into something, I think it's the perfect timing, first off, right, for what you're doing. You now do have more eyes on this, and you have the influencers like Carnivore MD and others kind of talking about this. You have Seed Oil Scout, and now you got, the head of HHS, RFK Jr., really calling out seed oils and the Maha movement. So it's a great timing for that. But I also want the audience to understand why. Like we could talk about, refined seed oils having bad, but also why you're choosing things like beef tallow, because I understand more companies are going to that. But could you go into the health benefits of going, from seed oil to something like tallow and how you chose, let's say, coconut oil for some things? Because again, people may not understand why not use a singular for everything if it's healthy.
Good question. So to address the first part, like, why these kind of oils versus seed oils. And I'm sure you've covered this on different episodes. And I'll start by saying, I'm not, I'm not carnivore MD by any means. I'm a secondhand researcher. But the understanding is that there's two issues with seed oils. One, it's how they're extracted, right? So they use super volatile compounds to actually extract these oils from these seeds they originate in. So they use things like hexane and a bunch of other chemicals that honestly go far beyond my understanding. Just things you would never, ever consider eating. If you go down the history, canola oil was originally used. It was like a byproduct of like machine lubricant and all this. And so there's kind of that aspect, which is the actual processing side of these oils. Then there's the aspect that, our bodies aren't designed to live off a large amounts of these kind of fats. So the most cited one that like Paul Saladino talks about a lot is linoleic acid, right? Mm-hmm. And when you look at it, like linoleic acid is found in animal meats. It's just and animal fat, sorry. It's just such a small degree. And so when you start looking at the proportions and you start looking at some kind of, I guess, evolutionarily and common sense approaches, which is the fact that like bears, for instance, will, before they hibernate, right, they'll eat a ton of nuts throughout the forest that are super high in linoleic acid. What does that do? It allows them to pack on all this extra fat and weight to subsist them through the winter hibernation period. Well, that sounds like an amazing, design of nature, right? And I guess if we were about to go months without food or months hibernating, you could make an argument maybe that linoleic acid should be, 60, 70% of an American's calories. But as we know, that's not how humans operate. That's not how we're designed. And so I think there's kind of two reasons why why no seed oils, right? And then the question of what fats we chose to use is there's multiple reasons. One, beef tallow is, again, my belief is probably the most not only satiating, but just nutrient dense fat out there. Vitamins A, D, E, and K. And there's just, it's loaded with nutrients to subsist you. There's a reason why, when you eat, for instance, if you come and try our beef tallow French fries, you go through a small bag and you're like, okay, you're not bloated. So you're not this uncomfortable, like, oh God, I can't eat anymore. But you're like, I don't really want to eat anymore. I'm very satiated. Right. And as opposed to if you go eat McDonald's fries that are coated in all these, chemicals to trick your senses into wanting more, you could go through a whole box of them. And so there's that aspect of tallow. Then there's also like, the historical and anecdotal precedence of using tallow, which is, it's usually a safe bet to use the oils and the fats that we were using for, thousands of years. Right. And so whenever I tell people, I obviously get pressed a lot by people who don't kind of follow this new Maha way of eating and this tallow movement and all this. And, I simply tell them like, hey, look, I understand there are studies out there that point to both aspects, and all the biological mechanisms aren't fully understood. And I for sure don't understand them as thoroughly as I'm sure does, or, name your expert. But I just encourage, like, we can do a simple test, right? You eat your French fries or whatever it is cooked in seed oils for one whole month. I'll eat mine cooked in tallow, and let's measure the results. And I would bet I have almost bet my life savings on this, but I will bet the farm my health outcomes will be far superior than what happens to your body during that month. And so anyway, I digressed a little there. The reason why we chose, though, like extra virgin olive oil in the dressings and coconut oil in the rice, is one, I wanted the rice option to have, some people out there who don't eat beef, but they want their protein from chicken. And I didn't want to limit that. And coconut oil has amazing health benefits with the medium chain triglycerides, and it has a bunch of antimicrobial benefits, and the list goes on, as well as having a really nice kind of floral scent to the rice. But so I just simply wanted that, something not sauteed in beef tallow to give that option to people. And then extra virgin olive oil. Obviously, you can't use solid fats in a liquid dressing, right? Because when you put them on the refrigerated line, if you put beef tallow in a dressing or coconut oil in a dressing, it would harden and separate. So that's where your liquid oils come in. And really, avocado oil is obviously okay as well. There's a lot of questions about the purity of avocado oil. But if you can get a really high quality organic extra virgin olive oil, and you don't heat it beyond a certain temperature, which in our case, using cold dressings, you're not heating it, there's a lot of health benefits to olive oil as well. Brian Johnson, I'm sure you follow along. He's a huge olive oil proponent, and I don't agree with a lot of the other stuff he does. But he is right. Like, extra virgin olive oil has a lot of amazing health benefits. And again, it checks all those boxes of historical precedent, maybe not evolutionarily, because, you do got to press the olives, and there is, some work, but they were doing it for, again, a long, long time in ancient history. So it's usually a safe bet there as well.
Yeah, and a big part of what you're saying there as well is the quality matters, right? It's not just about the process of everything and that you're using, let's say, beef towel and everything, which brings me to a point of kind of like, how do you ensure quality in the sourcing yourself for this? Because I understand even something like a Whole Foods, which is supposed to be organic, has GMO now, and sometimes you don't know this, and you're just kind of assuming that someone's doing some QC there and quality control, but it's not always the case. And that's the same thing I've learned about restaurants. Like, you could go to a really fine dining place and they're using kind of frozen tilapia that's not even the best really source, and maybe sat there too long, it's coming from China, somewhere else, but cooked very well and tastes somewhat well and kind of covers it up. So how do you go about ensuring that, and how far does that transparency go for even you to see? Are the farmers open with what they're doing? Can you see that? Talk about that.
Yeah. So, and it's a great question. I'll first touch on, like, highlighting that even the fancy restaurants, cut corners, are low quality in terms of the health of their ingredients. And that was kind of the issue we ran into, right? It's not just McDonald's and Chick-fil-A that are really bad. All these fancy restaurants, they advertise, we proudly serve Harris Ranch beef. And it's like, have you driven by Harris Ranch? I promise you will want to put that menu down and walk out of there if you knew where that beef was coming from. In addition to the seed oils they saute in, because they want that neutral oil flavor. They don't want any, flavors imparted on it. So anyway, you're absolutely right there. And as far as the sourcing, first, that's the thing you'll hear from other restaurateurs that highlights the difficulty of it, right? So there's really popular. Do you know Andrew Gruel on Twitter, Chef Andrew Gruel? He was mentioning this. Big fan of his, by the way, but he was mentioning this on Twitter, how the system is and the distributors are kind of stacked against the average restaurateur, basically making it sound like it's impossible. And to an extent, I would agree that it is difficult, and rather, I should say, the system is set up against you. Like, we're using like so many different distributors, and it's a headache trying to get what we need to get. And God forbid something runs out of stock, trying to find backups. It's really difficult, but it's definitely not impossible. I think what it takes is someone who cares about those and values health over profit, and I don't want to say, it's just, someone who just prioritizes the health, right? Because you can find these things. It just takes extra effort. And so, I think the big one for us is our beef, right? That is, I feel like it's, most everything else, I shouldn't say most everything else, but a lot of other things, it's either organic or it's not organic, right? And It's a lot simpler, but there's so many layers to beef suppliers, right? You have grass fed, you have 100% grass fed, you have pasture raised, not grass fed, you have pasture raised, grass fed, and grass finished, you have
Yes.
regenerative. And so, honestly, it was hard to actually communicate to some of our customers who aren't as well versed, what is regenerative meat, right? And is this grass fed? Is this pasture raised? And so, I knew my standards of what I wanted to serve in an ideal world, right? And it was a question at the beginning. I was like, is there enough supply of these high quality meats? And, for now there is. And so, our standards of what we use for our beef is 100% grass fed and finished. It's got to be pasture raised, because in my personal opinion, I would rather eat pasture raised but grain finished beef over something that is grass fed, but now they have these new factory farms that basically they're still factory farms, but they're just feeding them, grass and hay, right? So I'm of the mindset I'd rather have my animal out on pasture, even if it's finished in grain. I don't know if your listeners are aware of this, but cows have this unique ability with their ruminant stomachs to where if they're fed corn and soy, they can take these kind of inconsistent proportions of nutrients and different fats and sugars and all of this, and convert them, and they actually ferment it in their rumen, and convert them into the necessary fats that you and I need to eat. Whereas chickens and pigs can't do that. So a factory farm chicken that's fed corn and soy, a corn and soy fed pig, they can't change that. So actually they start accumulating these, linoleic acids and different fats into their fat tissue. And so when it comes to cows, pasture raised is that's the first thing that needs to be hit. And so if people go to Whole Foods, they have a pasture raised line, it's stage 4. It's pasture raised. It's not grass fed and finished, but I would eat that at home back in Sacramento all the time. And honestly, flavor wise, you get more fat on it. It's amazing. But when I started to look at like, okay, what do I want to eat? 90%, 6 out of 7 days a week. And what do I want my customers eating? And if this is going to go nationwide and I'm feeding millions of people, do I want those millions of people not only consuming beef that hasn't been grass fed and finished, but also supporting an industry that's not ideal, right? And we're already seeing the pull that we have on our distributors in these farms where, based on our expansion plans, like they need to plan their growth around us. And so it's really exciting, right? Because, and I hope I'm not diverging too much, but
No.
when I was first getting into this, I actually wanted to start a regenerative farm. I was literally like days away from signing on the dotted line for a piece of acreage up near Sacramento, and was going to do the regenerative farm, and it just didn't feel right. And now I see why. I feel like God was calling me in this direction. But, then I realized, wait, I'm not really equipped to scale and grow a big regenerative farm. But I feel like I am equipped to scale like a forward-facing retail brand, a restaurant, and that might actually have more of an effect by creating the demand for these natural, regenerative, grass-fed, cattle. And so I'm already seeing that, like, wow, if it's not too far forward where we may have to start investing alongside these farms and helping them scale and have a direct hand in growing people who are doing it the right way. And so, I know some of these farmers personally. I've visited some of these farms. People always ask which farms you get it from. Right now, I unfortunately have to kind of keep it close to the chest because there's such a limited supply, which I hate, because like my whole thing is people know I'm videoing inside our kitchen, showing you we don't use plastic sponges, right? I'm showing you these coconut husk scrubbers we use and trying to be as transparent as possible. But the fact of the matter is there's only a limited supply. So, but right now, all of our farms are California raised cattle. It's all 100% grass fed, 100% pasture raised. 2 of them are certified regenerative. One of them's not, but one of them practices regenerative practices. So, it really is like the pinnacle of beef. There is no higher, more complete, healthier product out there. And so, when it comes to that, and when it comes to, the other ingredients, it just takes digging and research, right? Whether it's, the purity of your olive oils, or, it's not always just, you have to get the most expensive luxury brand out there, right? Because, as a fast casual, how can I do that and keep the prices low, right? It's somewhat easy. I shouldn't say easy. It's more approachable to do what we're doing in a full service sit down restaurant, because you can just increase the prices and, I'll spend $40, $45 a plate. How do you do it when it's $20 a meal? Right. Yeah. And so, it's about doing the due diligence on like what health aspects matter. Right. Does it, I'm trying to think of a good example. But let's take this example, that an issue we're running into recently, of kind of not cutting corners, which is our French fries. So we've become, pretty famous for our French fries. One of the reasons is it's hard to get fully tallow fried French fries out there. Steak and Shake came out, said they're switching. Turns out they're pre-frozen, shipped to them, par fried in vegetable oils, coated in all this other garbage. And so we do all of ours in-house, and it is super labor intensive to get a crispy French fry in-house. It's a very long process. But we figured it out. But we also use organic potatoes, because, potatoes aren't part of the Clean 15. They, have a big pesticide issue. They have other applicants that I'll explain right now what they apply to them. But the issue we ran into was our suppliers were telling us, hey, we basically have this shortage of organic russet potatoes that's going on right now. One of our suppliers says it was, it's a 2-week thing. The other supplier said it's all summer. This is what happens with organic russet. I'm like, why? Like, what? Organic potato, isn't that like super ubiquitous? Like, what the heck is going on? Well, it turns out potatoes have a single harvest season for the most part, end of summer, early fall. They harvest them and then store them in warehouses for the entire year. Well, conventional potatoes, they spray with anti-sprouting agents, so that way they can last the entire year. You can't do that with organic russets, and thank God. But when May hits, like right about now, the shelf life is basically over, and so everything will start sprouting. And so basically, they do have kind of backup organic russet potatoes, but they're these kind of just second-rate potatoes. They're small. The sugar content is different, which basically just turned out in a really crappy French fry for us. And so right now we're actually R&Ding a different seasonal French fry that we're going to be launching hopefully at the end of this week, if not early next. And honestly, I think it's better than our original French fry. So God gave us a little gift there. I'm very excited, but it's this idea, like it'd be very easy just to switch to conventional russet potatoes, just for the summer, right? But when I look at this, I'm like, sure, I know I could convince people, and I know the majority of our customer base probably wouldn't mind. The hard part is, like, when you look at it, again, if it was part of the Clean 15, I would do it. Like our avocados, for instance, half of them are organic, half of them are conventional. And that's because it's the number one on the Clean 15 list, meaning no traceable pesticides found on, and like the 0.02% that it was ever found on is on the skin that you don't consume. So if potatoes were like that, I'd consider it, but they're not. And so you got to find a different or a better way to do it to where we can ensure we still use the organic potato. And again, it is stressful, right? Because we have people driving. I mean, we had a lady in from Tokyo. We had a lady in from Hong Kong, a couple in from London, people making 4-hour drives to come. A big draw was our French fries. And I have to tell them, I'm sorry, we're out for the next few weeks. But again, I think that's why people, at the end of the day, that's what I'm selling is trust. And so I think people, they trust me. They trust Talo as a brand that, okay, if it's served there, and this is kind of my goal, right? If it's served there, I just don't even have to read anything. I just
Yeah.
know it's the cleanest. Now, maybe if you're dairy intolerant or something, sub stuff out. But um, that's ultimately my goal is to, I wanted to create a place where, because even the other seed oil free restaurants that are out there, I still, I personally, like, I hate to say it, like, I don't trust them. It's really
Yeah.
hard because they often, maybe there's somebody out there doesn't have the holistic view like we do of the cleaning agents and this and that. When you really start thinking about it, it grosses me out and it's hard to take that step. And so I wanted to create a place where, Seed Oil Scout, this is his slogan, right? It's like dying fearlessly. Like, it's just this,
Mm.
like, I don't have to worry. I can just go in and just be an average consumer, swipe my card, get my meal, don't have to check things out. So that was kind of the goal from the beginning.
Yeah, and it sounds like you're addressing these challenges as they come up in this state of where you are, not cutting corners, keeping it the highest quality, taking each challenge one by one. Now, you also mentioned like your dream and vision is in this is growth, is scalability, and feeding lots of people. Do you find that is even possible, right? Because most of the times when you look at quality, right, you got to
Yeah.
then not scale as fast. It's the same thing I find in medicine, right? If you're going after quality people, needle is in haystacks almost sort of thing, people are like, why don't you franchise your centers all across the US? It's like, because the quality would go down. There's no doubt in my mind it would, as much as I put in training things and all sorts of parameters around it.
Oh
So
yeah.
there is an artistry to what you're doing. Artistry is hard to then scale up, let's say, as a technology or something, that can just be kind of what's your way of going to like about addressing that as you do want to scale and you realize, hey, the farmers can't keep up with this and the potatoes aren't in stock this year and everything else.
Yeah, I think without a doubt, I think the biggest problem, and we're talking pretty large scaling, like we'd run into this problem at large scale, would be the supply
Yeah.
of organic this, pasture raised beef, you name it. I think that will ultimately be the hardest because it's also kind of out of our control to a
Hmm.
degree. Um, I think as far as like maintaining the cleaning practices, uh, the non-toxic cooking methods, that won't be as hard. It's having the systems in place. It's, not allowing them to purchase, their cleaning products from any other supplier. You must purchase this brand, you name it. You can put in those restrictions. Um, but I think the supply, it might be the most difficult part. Um, we've got kind of our strategies of how we're going to deal with that, going forward. Whether it's expanding to new states earlier than a typical restaurant chain would to kind of be able to pull, beef from different regions, for instance, and allow some of our, allow California beef to catch up to our future projected demand,
Okay.
right?
Hmm.
So there's like small strategies like that. But yeah, at the end of the day, we're gonna scale as fast as nature allows. And I think naturally restaurants can only scale so fast. They're I shouldn't say notorious, but they're a difficult thing to. It's not a software business or other services businesses where it's easier to copy and paste
Yeah.
across the nation, especially something if you're not doing franchise model, which we don't plan to, again, to keep
Hmm.
the quality perfect essentially. But I think by the time we reach that, I think it'll just have to be having a close relationship with our suppliers is going to be paramount, and making sure they grow alongside us. And like I said, I love regenerative farming. I love it more than the restaurant industry. I'll tell you that. It's a lot more enjoyable to me. But if we have to start our own partner farms, if we have to invest alongside existing farms, that's what we'll do. And it would, even though maybe economically it's not even, it would require me to raise more money,
Sure.
make these investments that aren't an immediate return on invested capital per se. But in the long run, I think if that's what we need to do, that's what we need to
Yeah.
do. And there are certain benefits from that, right? The benefits of controlling the supply chain and knowing exactly where, our ingredients are coming from and exactly how they're raised, and also, protecting us from price fluctuations in the future. And it would definitely be an investment for future gain. Would be It'd probably be a maybe not a negative in the short term, but definitely like making a sacrifice to do that. But yeah, I think there's plenty of ways to make that work. I think where my focus is now is creating this blueprint that
Yep.
we feel confident can be copy and pasted, to different areas, because we've got our issues, not demand. Like, honestly, it's the opposite. I get a lot of pressure because there's so many people reaching out to us on Instagram, comments, DMs, emails, oh, come to South Carolina, come to Austin, come to Miami, you name it. People are requesting us. And, I'm like, oh gosh, I want to give all these people like this experience. And, I feel it too, because I know nobody else is going to do as good a job as we do. But at the end of the day, we're limited by the constraint of the operations. And so that's what I'm focusing on, dialing first. That way, once we have that dialed, we can take it to these markets where people want us.
Yeah. And demand always presents opportunities, right? That's always the thing. There's obviously great demand in what you're seeing, and you're going to get those hits from people all around. California, though, I do know is kind of like its own microcosm of a place that health and wellness, right, is just above and beyond the rest of the country, I would say. And you're going to find those outliers in South Carolina everywhere, because I get it too, right? People like, hey, do you have a center open in like somewhere Illinois I've never heard of? I'm like, not yet. Maybe someday. It's not like top market I'm looking at right now, but
Yeah.
hopefully
Yeah.
someday, right? And
Yeah.
it does beg that question of, we know we're attracting certain people that are going to be of the health conscious realm. But is that really enough, you feel, demand? Do you feel that there are enough people out there to continue the demand, and the opportunities will arise more and more to educate people to eat that way? Because it is about economics in some way, right? I understand this, that a lot of what we do in medicine is out of pocket. People like, no way. I'm not spending a dollar outside of insurance. Like, it's just not in the cards for me. And then we go, well, that's not for us. Just like if someone's like, hey, if there's a cheaper meal here, like I'm going to go for that because it's just calories to me, right? And I got to worry about paying bills and everything else with inflation. So do you feel that like you're just in a great, place right now, LA, all these places that are going to be your little pockets of health conscious that are willing to pay that? Or do you feel that there is a wave of kind of change going across the country where this could be really in every single state?
100% the latter. It is a sweeping movement, to put it mildly.
Yeah.
So we started up in Sacramento as a temporary pop up. We were only open 2 days a week. Um, Sacramento's not an LA market, right? And
Yeah.
we had right out of the gates 2 hour long lines, selling out of like 100 pounds of our French fries every Friday in like 2 hours. People were coming from all over Sacramento. I mean, literally, I tell people, like, there was like two moms I can remember that like were almost in tears, like saying, "Thank you for starting this. Like, we haven't been able to eat out in years." Blah, blah. And first, that was really special because I'm like, I feel your frustration and like emotional tie to it, because yeah, it's exhausting to cook at home every day, especially if you have kids. And so it's there. It's not just the big cities. And in fact, we picked Venice partly out of necessity. We needed to get open and quick, and this was the best spot we could do it. But these suburban markets, we're going to have better numbers in these suburban markets than we even do in the big cities, I think. And so it's without a doubt the demand is there. I mean, the amount of requests for franchises and you name it in all areas of the US, like you said, random towns in the middle of nowhere. We were kind of like, all right, like Use your judgment. I probably got to get to, LA or New York
Yeah.
first or something before I go to, some, small town in the middle of nowhere. But, I think the cost thing, I'm so glad you brought that up because, recently we've, one of our influencers has a big poll. Do you know Santa Cruz Medicinals? Follow him.
Mm,
Um,
mm.
he's got a big poll on the younger crowd, right? High school and college aged boys. And, uh, you know, I, I was in their shoes not too long ago. They don't have a great aspect on like perceived value and cost
Yeah.
and understanding like what we're delivering. Well, it's so frustrating to me because a lot of our, adult customers, they come in and, they're like, wow, like these prices are really great, especially for LA, right? People are used to just wild prices. And, my goal was with the ingredients that we are using and how we brand ourselves, and we could easily do the Erewhon grocery store model where our tacos, instead of being $17.95, which by the way, they're three large tacos, it's like over a quarter pound of meat. Uh,
Mm.
those could be $25 tacos, base price. It really could. And I know we could get away with it. And when you hear some of these high school kids coming in like, oh, this is so much more expensive than Chipotle. And it's like, well, like, duh, like, of course,
Yeah.
if company A is using garbage and we are using high quality, more expensive ingredients, of course we're going to be more expensive. But the message has to be spend the few extra bucks, spend the $4 extra, $5 extra compared to like a Chipotle. And even honestly, sometimes the spread's not even that big because we measure all of our portions. So
Mm.
everybody's always getting a quarter pound of meat on every bowl. But spend the $4 or $5 extra. It's better for your health. You'll be more satiated. It's more filling. And so we're purposefully trying to cap ourselves at a kind of reasonable bottom line profit margin that can allow us to expand and scale and reinvest. But one, too, that's not like almost, I honestly, Erewhon's a great brand. They have great products. Some of their prices are almost like insulting
Oh,
high.
astronomical. Yeah.
I'm walking in there. I'm like, damn it, $25 for this smoothie, blah, blah. Here's my card. Like, because
Yeah.
it's a good product. And, I know we could make that work. But that's not my goal. If I was in this for money, I would have stayed and grew this in Sacramento to 10 stores, had a super profitable, easy to run 10 location chain, and maybe expanded throughout California over time. But that's not my goal. My goal is I'm trying to bring this. I'm trying to give everyone as much access as possible to the healthiest eating experience they can have. That's my goal, plain and simple. And so keeping those prices low, we make a lot of, really strategic and creative decisions on how to keep these prices low, whether it's the cuts of our meat or, the expanse of our menu. We really think it through and try and keep these prices low. And we have some initiatives we're going to roll out down the line to keep them even lower, such as memberships where basically, we're taking the trade-off of, it's not even that I want to lock them into a membership. I mean, sure, it's great to have that recurring revenue, but it's also, hey, I'll trade you. I'll give you a cheaper product if you pay me ahead of time, right? That's the concept. And so we're actively trying to keep it at the most reasonable, fair price we can is the idea. And, down the road, if there's markets, low income markets that we can't serve, we've got other ideas up our sleeve of kind of sister chains and things we can roll out where you change what you're serving slightly and keep the prices lower to serve these kind of underserved markets. But I think before we even get to that, I think, as I'm sure you're probably aware of, it's first the educational part.
Yeah.
Because the fact of the matter is, it is the more affluent markets, and not even like the super rich, but just the middle class, upper class earners that have more access to the information. Maybe not even access, but they have more time in their lives to care about
Sure.
what's my VO2 max and what's my
Right.
BMI. Whereas a lot of these people, they don't, including some of the employees like at our restaurant, like they don't got time to worry about, does this burger have seed oils in it? Is this not? Like, they're just trying to get through life. They're trying to put food on the table, get a paycheck. They've got bigger problems in their lives. And so, I think what you're doing with your podcast and, what all these other influencers are doing is that's probably one of the most important parts for the growth of our business. Creating more consumers through education. Because I think once people understand it, it's a no-brainer. I'd spend much more than $4 extra to continually eat food that is healthy. The amount you save on the hospital and just how you feel after. Now, I'm sure it's the same with you. If I deviate from, healthy eating, it doesn't have to be I could eat a salad. I could eat a, whatever, one of our rice bowls, whatever it is. But if I go and eat something that's got seed oils in it or some other processed crap, I'm wrecked for the day. And I'm like, never again. I'm not touching it. I'm not doing it. And it just takes people getting to that point where, the switch is now permanent. So anyway, the educational part is probably the most important part. And then it's just, unfortunately, you got to kind of rely on, hopefully I remain, a benevolent leader of this brand and keep the initiative to keep prices low. I don't think there's any way other than that, other than just you hope the brand has the goal of keeping the prices lower, or else it's very tempting to, increase your prices when people will still buy it.
Well, there's a growing number of people that understand the greatest ROI you could have is by putting your money into your health, right? Into how you feel every day. And I think a lot of those people are learning it, unfortunately, through experience of being chronically ill, feeling poorly time and time again, mostly a lot of the time because of what they're putting into their body and eating on a daily basis. But now that you have a majority of chronically ill people and patients I know that suddenly have sensitivities, right? Can only eat certain things. How are you looking at and addressing it? What is the diversity of the meals you're providing for people that, suddenly can't eat this or corn or anything of this nature? Because it's becoming somewhat restrictive. I see when people like, I can't eat this list, I can't eat, a very short list. And then they try and go out, even when it's clean eating, suddenly don't have too many options.
That is, very difficult problem. I think ultimately the main thing is like, look, I can't help 100% of people.
Sure.
So I've got to look at kind of the 80-20 Pareto principle of like, okay, what's, I don't even know if that's the right application of that term there, but what's the majority of people that I can help, and how do I design my menu around that? So one of the things that a lot of people resonate is we're 100% gluten-free. So there's not a single thing on our menu with gluten. And now, marketing that's a little different because a lot of people get kind of turned off sometimes because they think it's some, kind of second-rate gluten-free bakery or something like that. It's like, no, we've just devised this menu. There's really no need for gluten in our menu. Our tortillas are corn tortillas for the tacos, right? And so I think things like that, like, being 100% gluten-free, no seed oils. I'm trying to think. We have no nuts. We have no seafood as of right now. We've talked about maybe having a seafood option down the road, but I think when you look at that, I'd run into far more people who have a seafood allergy than only eat fish and don't eat, red meat or chicken. So I'd rather offer red meat and chicken and not offer the fish. And so, I think the way our menus devise is we cover a good, I'd say like, 95% of the sensitive population out there as far as food allergies or sensitivities. I think the biggest one nowadays is the gluten. And, that's hard because the easiest thing to go seed oil free on, the easiest restaurant concept are burger joints, right? Because you have fries and you've got burgers. It's the easiest, and I don't want to demean it, but it is the easiest or simplest restaurant to kind of start up. And well, guess what? What are you going to do about the buns, right? Those aren't gluten-free. And it's a really big market of people who are either very, I don't know if allergic's the right word, but, celiac. My wife has celiac. So does her sister. They cannot have cross-contamination. They get wrecked. And at the same time, there's a lot of people now discovering like, oh yeah, I've realized since I've cut back on, gluten, my bloating's gone down, and, I've lost weight, and I feel healthier, and yada, yada. So that market's growing. So that was a big consideration for us. And we've had a lot of people beg us for burritos. They're like, oh, can you release a burrito or a burger? And I'm like, look, I think we have a broad enough menu to keep people, kind of almost entertained with what they're eating. But keeping that sensitivity to where it's a, kind of a safe space for these folks to dine, it's worth the trade-off. And so I think just having those simple ones, that's like 90% of the allergies. Is now we do get occasional dairy allergy, which we can't guarantee there's no cross contamination. But you leave off the cheese, you leave off our chipotle crema, and they're usually good. So I don't know if that kind of answers how.
No, it does. And I think, Graham, like the bigger point that people sometimes miss, it's not always the what of you eat. Of course, if you have a serious allergy and these things, you want to, of course, avoid, but it's the how, right? It's how is it being made? What is it cooked on? How is it clean, right? Those kind of things. And of course, your why, like why am I eating it? What time? These sort of things without stress in your life. That's going to make such more of a bigger impact on your health than constantly focusing on the what, what is in it without understanding quality, how it's created, all these things. Would you agree?
I would agree to. I obviously think there are certain things that I'm like, gluten's an obvious one. And I think that's what you're getting at is, I'm actually about to go to the restaurant. So I never eat gluten basically because I have to be gluten free with my wife and my oldest daughter, we think, has it as celiac as well. So I'm basically celiac. But I do very well with high quality, sourdough breads or high quality flour tortillas. And to an extent where sometimes, honestly, starting my morning off with a little bit of that, sometimes I feel better. It calms my digestion a little bit. So like today, one of our some of our super fans from Orange County, they have an organic like home bakery she's starting. So she brought me an organic, unbleached. It's just organic wheat flour with pink Himalayan salt and water. And she brought me a fresh baked sourdough loaf. So when I go to the restaurant this morning, I'm gonna go have that as my breakfast, and I'm gonna enjoy it. But I agree. I think especially with gluten, that's the big one where you have to get organic. Because you can't have the I know Gary Brecka is beat this drum 1,000 times, but it's it's the folic acid and the other additives that they do for the enriched flours. Not to mention, I don't know if people know this. Maybe it's more. I was shocked when I heard this, but when they harvest wheat, right? Wheat is obviously conventional wheat sprayed with a ton of pesticides in the field, right? That's already bad. But when they harvest the wheat and they put it in the trucks, they actually soak it in more pesticides because the pesticides keep it from sprouting mold. And so you're literally like submerging the final product. It's not like you're just, it's not you in the yard with your Roundup bottle spraying it to the plant. Maybe it doesn't touch the head of the wheat that you actually eat. Okay, maybe that wouldn't be the end of the world. First off, they're spraying it with airplanes over the field, and then they're putting it in a truck and soaking it in the. I'm like, no wonder why it is making people gluten intolerant, right? They don't do that in Italy, and that's why people. Oh, I go to Italy, I eat pounds of pasta.
The Italian paradox, right? Yeah,
exactly. And so, obviously, in an ideal world, if you could go real deep on this, right? You could get organic einkorn wheat flour that you hand grind at home, and it's an ancient wheat variety, and that would be better. But I think if you stick to organic and a long fermented sourdough, I think that's really shown the most amount of difference in how people react to where some, I wouldn't even, maybe not full celiacs, but like very sensitive people to gluten can actually have sourdough as long as it's been fermented for like 3 days. So I think that's really important. I think obviously like, like if you were going to have, I forget, like even seed oils, right? Like there's like, what is it? Is it like expeller pressed
Mm,
sunflower oil where they don't, they're not using the hexanes, these dangerous chemicals to extract it. Sure, you're going to have as bad of a reaction to that as you would, canola oil or a safflower or something like that. Maybe not. But I still think like those inherently, like we're not designed to consume large amounts of them. The
right.
dose makes the poison, as you know. So I think that's kind of my outlook. It's like, also, what are you doing with the 90% of your diet, right? If
Yes.
if 10% you go off your path, that's fine. But like, what's the day in, day out? I kind of take the philosophy I'd rather play that the most safe. So I'd rather
Yeah.
have, very simple things that I don't have to question. How much of this do I have to eat for it to be not healthy? Or, if you keep that core, like I wake up every morning and, make the same healthy breakfast every day, to where at least I know one of my 3 meals, or 2 meals or one meal nowadays is taken care of, then I think that's kind of a good philosophy,
Yeah.
maybe.
I feel like people just overcomplicate it, right? Simplicity is so key in health and just understanding, drinking out of glasses, you're doing things like that, right? It's the
Yeah, Mountain
little
Valley.
health actions that add up, but just keep it simple, right? Don't try and, talk yourself out of things or become overwhelmed and then stressed, as we know, is a terrible response for the system to trying to stay healthy. Graham, I got one more question for you. What advice would you give to someone looking to start a business focused in health and wellness?
Good question. Okay, without sounding too corny, honestly, the first thing I would point someone to is I would say seek God. So I'm very
Mm,
religious, and you know, if I told you the full story of the pop up, maybe we can cover this another time. But
yeah,
the amount of just like mini miracles
yeah.
that were presented to me along this, again, I mean, none of this should have worked. Like, I mean, I had the idea for a while, but from when I finally made the decision, like, hey, we're going to start this, to actually opening our doors on the pop up, it was like under a month, or it was like maybe it
Mm,
was like 5 weeks or something like that, which is ridiculous. The fact that we pulled that off is nothing short of a miracle, and I could go down the long list. And so that's what I would say. So that's my purpose behind this, is I'm trying to do His work. I believe He's calling me to do it through health, because I don't believe, well, I shouldn't, I don't know. It's hard to have a healthy soul and a healthy holistic life if you're essentially being poisoned, and
sure.
it affects, as you know, affects your neurology, it affects everything. And so if you're mentally unwell, it's hard to be spiritually well. And so that's my mission. That's what I would say, because I think a lot of people, he will talk to you. He'll point you in the directions, right? He gives you these interests that maybe you don't understand. Like, why am I, like, for me, I was like, why am I so interested in this regenerative farming? Like, I couldn't see how it plays out. I'm like, am I going to be like a farmer? And I was like, it doesn't really make sense. And now, fast forward, I'm like, oh, well, it's given me this huge advantage of understanding the restaurant side of things. And okay. And so I think that's first and foremost for me. I'd say second is like, you know, when it comes to the business side of things, there's kind of two schools of thought, right? There's like, focus on, what makes money, what's the best business model, yada yada. Then there's the follow your passion. And I think for me, I'm much more into the follow the passion. I didn't used to
Mm,
be. I was a finance guy. That was my major. I'm just
same.
listening to countless business podcasts. I was like, oh my gosh, I could spin this up and make $1 million tomorrow, blah, 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 And that ultimately didn't serve me, because I would never stick with anything. And I'd say though, the mental trap is that following your passion doesn't mean it's going to be easy. So I always tell people, my take on it, it's like a workout, right? There's days you work out that you definitely don't feel like doing it. But once you get into that workout or post workout, you're always like, oh yeah,
Yeah.
so glad I did that. All right, I'm feeling good, feeling great. Like, what's the career equivalent of that? Like, it's gonna be hard. Like, I mean, this restaurant is the hardest thing I've ever done in my life. Like, last week, I think I did like 4 19-hour days in a row. Was at the restaurant till 1 a.m., waking up early. Like, it's been the hardest thing I've ever done. But, the passion behind it offsets that. And I'm like, okay, I can keep going with this. If this was a business that I was not passionate about, I'd be long gone by now. And it hasn't
Yeah.
been that long. The towel would have been thrown in. So that's what I would say is as I'm sure you've learned as well, like the money will come. If that's really an important thing for you, like you'll find a way to have the money, right? The money will
Sure.
come eventually. And I think what's most important is finding that passion or that service you can provide people. We one last little anecdote. Before we started the restaurant, we were getting closer to our true passion, and we tried to start a tallow skincare company, and
Mm.
or like an all natural skincare company that was tallow based. And we actually did fairly well on it, like right out of the gates. My wife's was a director of marketing in her past life, so she's really great at the marketing. And but we kind of hit this like impetus where it was hard to differentiate and all this. And we were like, okay, well, like what do we need to do to grow this? And I literally came down to like, what? I think the best thing for me to do would be to like go out to the mall, hand out free samples to people in the mall, or it sounds silly, but like literally stand on the street corners at busy intersections, handing out free samples to cars and holding up signs. And to be honest, I didn't have the confidence to go do that.
Mm.
And it was a big red flag to me of like, if I can't stand on the street corner and hold up a sign to promote something, that means I don't care about it enough. And
Mm.
I told my wife, I was like, the next thing I do, I have to be willing to stand out on the street corner with a sign and promote whatever we're doing. That's how confident I have to feel in it. Fast forward a few months, I literally have a sign that says honk if you hate seed oils, it has our Instagram handle. And I was out in the busiest intersection in Folsom, California, was getting honks all day long to promote my business. And I said, it was a little embarrassing, I'm not gonna lie, but
Of
I was
course.
willing to do it because I said, no, like it's what's got to be
Yeah.
done. I've got to
Yeah.
do this. And so, it's paying attention to little red flags like that. I feel like that, you know, are good guiding principles. Like we're given these gut feelings and these,
Yeah.
points of interest for a reason.
I really love that. I love that message as a whole, not just for entrepreneurs, for anyone looking to heal or get through anything tough. It's got to be a leap of faith at some point. I say, speaking with thousands of patients, it's like all of them took some sort of a leap of faith. It's got to be somewhat of a sacrifice too. Like you got to give up things you liked in that past life that probably led you into disease, and you got to do really tough things, right?
Yeah.
And so it's never going to be easy in a sense, but if you truly value it, if you put your passion to it, you will get through and it will take you and evolve you to a greater place, right? On multiple levels, and it'll transform you. I believe following your calling and following God and everything will transform you to a greater person. Same with healing. If you do it properly and really go after it, it will transform you and leave you in a better place and make your life that much more fulfilling. So, Graham, thank you so much for all you do and for that story. And tell us where we could learn more about Talo Organic and yourself.
Yeah, sure. So our Instagram handle, which is where we're most active, is just at Talo Organic, but Talo is spelled Talo. So Talo Organic. And our website is taloorganic.com. Like I said, we constantly post updates about, future locations or new menu items or whatever it may be, as well as a lot of like educational content. We're going to be starting a series soon where I kind of break down, without highlighting what restaurants they come from, break down kind of a buyer's guide of what to look out for on restaurant menus so people can understand, like, because there's a lot of really great labeling tactics out there that restaurants like to use to make their stuff sound healthy. But I'm going to kind of take a deep dive and, try and help people there. But yeah, that's the main places to find us. And hopefully everybody will find us in a city near them soon. That's our goal.
I was gonna say I'm looking forward to seeing one here, but of course I'm in LA a bunch, so I gotta go there more often now. I have an excuse.
You're Miami, right?
I'm in Sarasota, West Coast of Florida.
Oh,
But
seriously.
yeah. But I mean, listen, it sounds like an amazing venture, and you're doing it in the right way, like you said, with the passion, everything. So there's no doubt we'll be seeing these across the country soon.
Well, hey, I really appreciate that, and I'm flattered you think so. And yeah, I hope so. I'm just, one day at a time. One day at a time
Yeah.
is
Well,
my first
thank you
play.
again and best of luck. And if the audience is listening, be sure to follow Graham on Instagram. That's at Talo Organic, Talo. We'll include all the links to his social channels in the show notes. And until next time, continue writing your own healing story.